Hola, Oliver. ¿Qué pasa? ¿Qué pasó? Hello, everybody tuning in to this as well. How's it going? Today, we want to talk about something called the responsibility that comes with truth, which basically means that if you're going to stake a claim on truth, you say, "Yeah, this is what I believe. This is what I think." You better actually do the work that comes along with the privilege of having to say that what you believe in is the truth, because one, what you might be saying may very well be wrong, which will cause you to look kind of like an idiot down the line, possibly, or most likely, I would say even. And two, you're actually doing a disservice to the very cause that you're actually trying to support. And I think we'll easily demonstrate this in the next hour or so that we're going to be talking about this. So the first sort of example I could use to sort of launch us off into this would be one that demonstrates how, it doesn't correlate with intelligence, meaning that it doesn't matter how smart you are, everybody is susceptible to this. There are many, many intelligent people, Einstein included, who have made the mistake of believing in one truth at the expense of others, just to support some feeling or some emotional attachment. So, and end up being wrong. So it's clear that it has no correlation with intellect. Rationality is something that has to be worked at constantly. It's a never-ending cycle. You have to work for truth, and you can't just rely on your intellect, and much less on just the uh, surroundings. Your community or what appeals to you. If everybody's saying, yeah, the cool new thing is to support Ocasio-Cortez's Green New Deal, without actually looking into the bill and seeing what the fuck she's talking about. I mean, yes, it's cool to go green and to not pollute our environment. I think most people would agree. Contrary to what most people think, conservatives, right, Republicans, traditionally, they're the ones who cared about the environment more than progressives, because progressivity has to do with doing better, whereas conservatism has to do with keeping things, conserved, the environment included. So there you go. Maybe you didn't know that little tidbit, but hence why we're talking about this. I mean, the truth is very obscure. Um, so one of the things that I was talking about was Einstein. And I want to tell you a little bit about what it was. He called it his greatest blunder. Basically, when he discovered that the universe was expanding, um, in support of his, uh, I guess, thesis, he kind of just called that his like a fudge. It wasn't necessarily true, and he later on called it his biggest blunder because, in fact, the universe truly is expanding. So even though he had discounted that in support of his larger kind of idea of what was happening to the universe. So there you go, right? Um, I'd like to talk about, or ask Oliver here about one of the first topics we can talk about to demonstrate this whole responsibility towards truth, which would be farming and agriculture, and then being, as it's very relevant, veganism and fruitarians and all these kinds of other dietary sects that are kind of popping up and fighting. What's the actual truth when it comes to what happens to the environment when you recycle, when you don't recycle, when you farm in one way or in the other, using GMOs, pesticides, blah, 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 and then how that's connected to health and so on. So this is Oliver's specialty. For anybody who doesn't know, he studies this and works in the medical community in this area. So Oliver, what can you tell us about this?
I'll start off saying that everything I'm saying, I'm always open to the fact that it could be bullshit.
There you go. Step one.
That's really
Responsibility
like,
towards truth. I think, just so I cut you off again because I talk so
yeah,
much, but
yeah.
beautiful. What you just did is very demonstrative. I don't know. I knew I was going to fuck up that word. Dem, demonstrative. It demonstrated one of the responsibilities you have towards truth. The
Yeah,
disclaimer, the initial disclaimer that you are open to the idea that you may very well be wrong, but this is the current position that you hold. I think that's a very intelligent thing to do. You're not identifying your ideas with who you are, with your identity. You're not stuck with that idea. Okay, please move forward. Thanks.
And I'm also aware that I can still fuck up in the sense that I can get attached to opinions and occasionally, react emotionally and not want to listen to another opinion. But I try to remind myself that as much as possible. I mean, I've had a practice since I was very young of writing down all of my beliefs and looking at my sources, going over all this stuff over and over again. It's something I like to do because we can always be wrong. It's shocking. It's shocking how much you can really believe something and feel like you've been over it 100 times and then come across a piece of evidence that just blows it out of the water. And suddenly you're in the unknown again and you're like, I don't know what to do with my life because I've built my direction, my motivation off of this opinion that I've had, and then suddenly it falls apart. Anyways, I do still believe in truth because there are some things that are consistent, or at least in my experience have been very consistent and more consistent over the years that I've tested over and over again, versus other things that are clearly less consistent. But all to say, yes, my current opinion is the one I'm going to present now. And in the, say, like nutrition or environmental world, it's a great example, or at least my experience is a great example of this kind of arc that we can easily go through and many times go through. I forget where this quote comes from. I think you might know this one, but it's something like, if as a child you're not a liberal, you're a psychopath.
Yeah. It basically goes something like, when you're young and if you have any heart, you'll be a liberal. When you're older, if you have any brain, you'll be conservative.
Right. I don't 100% agree with that, but it's a great sentiment. It's the sense that we tend to be attracted to more of the emotional appeal, the idealistic appeal at first when we're younger. When we get into things, it's almost always what people gravitate to first.
Yeah, but there's very real hard data supporting it, as well as just logical conclusions. Like, for example, biologically speaking, we've figured out relatively recently that the brains of both male and females finish developing their prefrontal cortex at around the age of 25, which is, wow, incredibly surprising. So that would, give you a good example as to why we're not completely rational until we're around our mid-20s. So that's just one thing I just wanted to point out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in many historical cases that I've read of, it's an age-old social manipulation tactic to rally the young, because they're young and it's easy to manipulate them using emotional appeal. So that's my experience too.
Yeah, but by that same token, I've heard this, I forget who said it, but it was on Joe Rogan's podcast. It had to do with the idea that the whole reason we also support young people's kind of ideas, even though they're not completely rational sometimes, is because they're the ones who will push for change and movement. Whereas
they're often the most aggressive.
Yes, exactly. They're the ones who are in the best position possible to be progressive and to change things up, which is a good thing. It's just that when the two sort of sides of society obviously polarize and can't come to a necessary agreement, then things fuck up. So, but both are necessary. They kind of counterbalance each other. But of course,
the young can be the root of change for
yes,
good. Well,
but unfortunately, you have to admit that it seems to be that truth in this whole sort of spectrum thing pertains more to conservatism to some degree, even though classically we've seen the progressives and the left be more scientific, which is kind of a strange thing. But
I'd say that's more recent, no?
It depends on what we're talking about and where and exactly. But I mean, when you're talking about scientific truth, it's clear now that the left has abandoned it for various reasons. So I think it's a bit of a cliche, too hard of a cliche to just or let's say a stereotype actually, to just accept the fact that conservatives are less devoted towards scientific truth. I mean, they have been traditionally in the States for various reasons, but ultimately conservatism is associated with wisdom and with older people
I also don't
usually.
want to get bogged down in the left versus right
No,
words
yeah, but I'm talking
because
about
the words have changed meaning a lot
they
over
have.
time.
You're absolutely right, but I just want to say that like I would say that rationality belongs more usually to conservatism to some degree.
Right. Okay.
Um,
If you go based on purely like the basic idealistic values of both sides, yes, I absolutely agree with that.
yeah.
But in practice, especially nowadays, things are a little all over the place. All to say, I'll get back to the sustainability, veganism, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
Uh,
so I think we've both sort of opened up the field a lot. So returning to the initial questions, I would like you to start with the environment first.
sure.
So
Yeah.
sustainable farming and also what the environmental issue, as well. And then after we can move on to the health aspect, which comes to
Well,
vegans and all that.
I think the environmental aspect actually will explain the health side of it too. So I'll use. I always come back to this guy because I think everyone should absolutely watch this. I'm not really into most TED Talks, but occasionally I find a gem. Alan Savory, Alan Savory, as in the taste. Yeah, so Savory. His TED Talk is fantastic. He's very, very, very well researched environmentalist, and his story um, explains it all. Really, is at first he thought that animal farming was the worst thing ever. I think he comes from South Africa, and he hated how farming seemed to destroy a lot of the land out there. It displaced a lot of the elephant life, which he seems to have been very passionate about. Elephants are beautiful creatures, it's true. But all to say, he became a staunch environmentalist and worked on a very large scale in very authoritative fields for a very, very long time. But what he saw over time kind of contradicted a lot of his presuppositions and his colleagues' presuppositions. What they noticed is that the growing desertified areas in the world were actually the areas that had the least grass-fed rumination, animal cattle-based agriculture. And they also, before this, actually realized that prairie lands were the most carbon sequestering, water sequestering, because water is actually the #1 greenhouse gas, if people didn't know that, environments in the world. Surprisingly, you'd think maybe an Amazon rainforest would sequester more carbon, but prairie lands have an incredible biodiversity just in the soil. They create so much bacterial life, and they attract so many different types of wildlife. People freak out about the bees disappearing now, and people wonder why. It's actually because of the growing desertification, the lack of prairie lands that are growing worldwide, really. So what he realized is, okay, well, shit, the cows actually fertilize the soil and create the biodiversity that creates carbon sequestration, prairie lands, and all this. Anyways, he started some major projects a few years ago in Africa. I forget which areas exactly, but within a fairly short period of time, they were able to turn desertified areas using just cattle that they fed grass that was imported in
Yeah.
into very biodiverse prairie lands, which are incredible for the environment, also produce an enormous amount of food, healthier food, more nutrient-dense food, blah, 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 blah. And on
This,
the
of
other,
course, this of course excluding like the sort of factory farming type methods,
right.
right? We're talking about free roam, healthy, not just like churning out crazy ass amounts of
And
beef. Okay.
thing is, the more you do that, you actually end up getting more animals over time than you would with factory farming, because they get so healthy, they have an abundant lifestyle.
Yeah,
It's
but not enough to sustain the demand, which is insane, right? So,
no,
but
Dude, the desertified areas in the world are massive. If we could turn them into areas, even part of them into areas that could produce meat, it would be a fucking life saving game changer. I'm not kidding.
Really?
This, yeah. Anyways, as for the actual numbers, I mean, we had more bison in North America than we have beef in North America now. Before we arrived, we killed most of them off. It's to say that cow farts are going to be the cause of carbon carbon rise in the environment is insane because, well, first of all, methane has a half-life of 12 years as opposed to millions of years like carbon does. And if you raise the cattle properly, then it sequesters more carbon than it produces anyways. So that's why I'm so passionate about this stuff.
Yeah, this is fucking cool. I mean, I didn't know this. See, this is what I'm talking about. The truth,
Yeah,
when you actually go and do your research, you care. See, I just want people who's listening right now to understand that, Oliver here is actually cares about the environment. He's an environmentalist. He's a
absolutely.
health freak guy. That's all we ever talk about, except not enough for me to actually have known this stuff about it.
Right.
This is why I wanted to talk about this a little bit more because I'm also in need of some truth here as well. So yeah, I just wanted that sort of caveat or kind of like a side note.
Yeah.
Okay, continue, please. I'm getting mind blown here. So
This is why I'm so passionate about this stuff.
yeah,
And so I'll make two more big points. On the other end, people think that growing soy, corn, grains, fruits, and all that is better for the environment than raising cattle. But that's simply insane because we know based off of statistical fact that you kill more animals by raising an environment, destroying an ecosystem logically, to grow monocrop agricultures, which you have to keep all types of wildlife out of. You have to have people in many cases patrolling these areas to shoot any rodents that come on. I've worked on farms as well where you had to pick up small animals behind the tractors that were crushed or were just torn apart, really. Or there's also when you're going through the food, often you'll come across rodents, snakes, frogs, stuff like that. There's millions and millions and millions of animals that get killed like this. Maybe they're small animals, but based off of vegans' ideology, they should matter just as much. And not to mention the bacteria in the soil and the insects, pesticides that are needed to keep them off of the plants, blah, blah, blah. And then you talk about producing plant foods being better for the environment, but then you have for people local to the north, you have to export all of that food up north. That's not good for the environment either. And you have to make more and more land. So you have to cut down more, like the Amazon rainforest, for example. Yes, in part it is getting replaced by cattle farms. And I'm not for industrial meat production. I agree. It's not much better. But
it still goes to show you that if you're going to cut swaths of rainforest like in Jakarta or Indonesia somewhere, the second largest rainforest, to grow some kind of this oil.
It's mostly soy and corn now.
Soy and corn, but no, there's also this new kind of oil that they're making, canola, not canola. Anyway, they're using this oil now for lots of different kind of products, and they're cutting swaths of the rainforest for it. So it's interesting. It makes a lot of sense to me, especially what kind
it's
of
very logical once you get
yeah. I mean, you're painting this picture with logic, and it's like this makes a whole lot of sense. But also it would be good to go in and actually get the data and the statistics for all this stuff.
Yeah.
But it makes you think how interesting it is that someone can have this cognitive dissonance. They don't even know it. It's like, well, if you really care about the environment, first off, why wouldn't you go and do the research to find out this sort of information that's counter yours? Well, one, because you identify yourself with your ideas, so you feel like you just want to reinforce. It feels good to reinforce your bias rather than go against and check. It's like, so what do you care about really? Do you care about forming an identity of your own through your ideas, or do you actually care about the causes you pretend to care about? I'm saying pretend in this case because that's exactly what you're doing. Because you're looking at people who, on the one hand, usually they're not only are vegans, pro agriculture and like, and also pro animal, but by the same token that they believe in not only the health aspects of eating vegetables and the ethical aspects of not killing cattle, um, it's strange that they're actually kind of doing a disservice to both of those
The
sort of.
irony is not lost on me. It goes so deep.
Yeah.
The pattern repeats itself again and again. Like you can find countless cases of vegan documentaries where they force the people who are taking care of the animals to actually abuse the animals so that they look distressed to film it.
Mm-hmm.
It's there. These are proven cases. There's quite a number of them. It's horrible. There's one article that I thought was hilarious. Is a bunch of vegans at a petting zoo stampeded and killed a few pigs, baby pigs, trying to get to them to pet them. I mean, these are just symbolic or almost figurative examples.
Yeah.
Of the larger picture, but it's a joke. I'm sorry, it is.
But you can see. So I think it's a good segue into people's kind of flaw when it comes to tapping into the emotional side of truth. So obviously, you're going to want to believe in a truth that emotionally feeds you in the way that you want to be fed. So, for example, if I tell you, "Oh, look, you're killing a beautiful fuzzy animal. Let's go vegan."
You must be doing something wrong for your health, for your spirit, for the world. Of course,
exactly.
that's the first thing you want to jump on that because
so the people are appealing to the emotions and then therefore bypassing the rationality. It's like if you tell me, I'm fortunately now, but it wasn't always the case. It's only been, let's say, a year or two that I've actually been getting into the politics and this kind of stuff. But even to this day, I realize it's only been a year since I've really started looking at the opposite sort of argument to try to find truth and not to try to identify with my ideas. And I realized that it's much more difficult than you would think. You actually consciously have to try and look for things that will kind of initially make you angry and make you stressed out, make you frustrated. But
in some of the early episodes, I tagged on this, but it's very simply that we have a reality map. This is neurology. Your limbic system it attaches to a worldview, and then as soon as that worldview gets challenged, it freaks out because it uses that reality map to navigate, to feel like it's in control and able to survive. So as soon as information comes in that challenges that, you get an emotional defensive reaction. And it's very unpleasant and it's unhealthy even, but you have to go through that to be able to develop a more accurate map of reality to be able to exist in reality and navigate it properly.
Yeah, to some degree, because then you can develop extreme skepticism, which is also kind of not good. It pushes you into nihilism and all these other kind of
balance. It is.
Yeah. So but on the one hand, it's true. I mean, knowledge can help and it can hurt in certain ways. Truth, that is, and I think that would be an interesting thing to segue into as well. I mean, this is again. Rogan has all these interesting guys come on his podcast. This one guy gave an example of this idea that who was it? Actually, you know what? I think I know who it was. If you give me a second to think, it was Weinstein. It was Eric Weinstein. He gave the example of whether the utilitarian aspect of truth or the lack of truth outweighs the factual truths out there. So the example was, that hedgehogs can throw their quills. Now, this is false, but it's a sort of maxim, let's say, that has been propagated by for a long time by many people. And the utilitarian aspect of that is that if you have a hedgehog and you think that it throws its quills, you're going to stay a lot further away from it than you would if you just had the information that the quills are sharp, they can get into your skin and they can hurt you. Try to stay away. So if you think that it can throw its quills, that has some value. It actually it gives you a better outcome if you believe this falsehood. But then down the line, Rogan had pointed out this interesting aspect that, in what context are we talking about the utility? Because it might very well be utilitarian to believe this falsehood, but if you are if people let you believe in falsehoods to begin with and you don't have nuance, then you're actually in the end run going to suffer from it more than you would gain from it if you had believed these falsehoods. So
Are you following someone's truth or the truth? That's the question you always have to ask.
Exactly. So I mean, utilitarianism is to some degree important, but again, there's no reason for why we can't just look at the porcupine and say it doesn't throw its quills. That's the factual truth. But you might as well act as if it could throw its quills. Stay as far away from it as possible. Because why is it that the knowledge that it doesn't throw its quills will actually make you feel like you can go near it anymore? If you really understand the dangers of having the quill, which apparently can burrow into your skin, I mean little particles of it anyway, and cause infections and stuff like that. That's pretty gruesome shit. I would stay away from a fucking porcupine regardless of if it can throw its quills or not. It's got quills. That's the important part. Just like you don't need to tell a lion that it can projectile fireballs at you from 15 feet away, so stay away. No, it's a fucking lion. It's dangerous. So, I think ultimately you may very well benefit more from knowing factual truths. The problem again, I think, is when you can't know the truth. Then you have to be skeptical all the time, and then you're not making decisions, you're not doing anything, and that's where it becomes extreme. So you have to eventually believe in something or have some kind of model in your head to make a decision. But anyway, I just want to point that piece of responsibility that you have towards yourself and towards others when it comes to truth, right?
Mm. Absolutely.
So speaking of responsibility for yourself, that can have very real world impacts other than just these animals, because how often are you going to encounter an animal? Funny side note, I learned my lesson when it came to skunks. Vancouver is filled with them. I mean, I would walk home from school or from work or some shit, and you would see like 4 or 5 on my block. There was always 4 or 5 running around. So I literally
not long ago,
got used to, yeah. So I got used to them, and then this one day, this one skunk just kind of plopped down. I'm having a smoke behind my building, and with a couple buddies, and it just plopped down beside me. And I realized, oh look, it's a fucking skunk. That's cool, and I'm just chill about it. And they're like, my buddies would just walk away. They're like, oh dude, that's not good. That's not good. It's like, oh, it's fine. It's just sitting there. It's chill. And then I just stood up, and it freaked. It turned around and sprayed me at point blank. Point blank, dude. First thing that you realize is that you can't smell. Okay, the first thing that hits you is you feel this kind of wet feeling on you, and then you're like, oh shit, I just got sprayed. And then it hits you within seconds. This whole burning rubber sensation kind of smell goes right up your nose, and it fills your sinuses and your entire face. And it's just the most horrid thing, and it stays for days in your, it's just gross. So anyway, now if I had known that, and I did know that it could spray. Do you know what I'm saying? I just didn't know that it's temperamental and it could easily get frightened and spray you. So, I think even the truth sometimes isn't enough. We're talking about human beings here. We're kind of stupid sometimes, regardless of knowing the truth. So that was just a little side note.
No, it's a good example.
But because we're talking about doing a service to yourself, and that the responsibility that you have towards truth, not only for others but for yourself. That leads me to ask you now more about the veganism and the dietary stuff. Um,
Right.
I'm seeing too many people believe in one thing or another. Like I've already mentioned to you in the past, this wonderful guy who's incredibly intelligent, but for some reason believed that the answer to the world's health problems, and I mean all of them, cancer, anything, you name it, um, was, short of maybe amputation. He believed the answer was detoxing. And how do you do that? You become a fruitarian. You just eat fruits. And it's like, God, you can't reduce all the problems to one solution like that. Just the absence of certain foods is just going to all of a sudden fix the world's problem. How can you be a smart guy? And like I said, even Einstein fell prey to this kind of stuff. So, now we're seeing the rise of carnivorism as well. And it's like, I feel like, there are good arguments for both sides to certain degrees, but ultimately it's like who you are as a human being, we know is very different from what another group could be like, or another human being can be like. We evolve in different ways. We have different dietary needs. So, I still think veganism is probably outweighed by at least omnivore sort of diets, because I mean you need diversity in your sort of diet, is what seems to be the case in the kind of research that I've made. But what do you have to say about that? Because I hear very dangerous things. There was an article in Italy, I think, about a law almost passing where children would have to be that it was legal for parents to actually, they made it illegal for parents to make their kids go vegan because they understood there was dangers to that.
I
So
think that's very smart because I know of a dozen cases of babies dying on vegan diets.
yeah,
And I'm serious about that. That is something I'm very passionate about, and it makes me thick. It makes me it makes me fucking sick to think about every single time, because I have nothing against anyone trying a vegan diet at all. It's as soon as you push it on others, and especially a fucking child or a pet, that is not okay. That is just not okay. Even if you had all the science, all the epidemiological science that you ever wanted, saying that most people do better on a vegan diet,
mhm,
that still isn't enough data to say that it is right for everyone, absolutely everyone, let alone a fucking child.
yeah.
So I'm not okay with that at all, at all, at all, at all.
But I'm curious, like,
Yeah.
where do you think people fall prey to the fallacies and flaws in logic when it comes to veganism and all these dietary kind of things? This
Well,
tribalism.
unfortunately, the medical scientific world it goes deep. I am not on one side or the other in terms of I'm not like for I've met a million fucking doctors, and that's an exaggeration. I've literally met um, dozens of doctors and alternative practitioners. I want to be specific and exact about. I don't want to generalize here.
Mhm.
So, and I've found as many quacks on both sides, no questions asked. I absolutely believe that. Um, I say it's unfortunate that it's so hard to educate oneself, because I think that is what is necessary. At least in my case, I've had a lot of health problems. For the average person, probably not as they don't have to go through as much of an ordeal as I had to, but
But
it's
you
a
see,
minefield. It's a fucking minefield out there.
here's where I feel people fall prey. I think to begin with, we're maybe we're doubting too many. So I think the quacks that you're talking about, they're going to be the ones who usually represent, I would imagine, who represent one of these, tribal sects, these polarized positions. So you got like the ultimate carnivore, like, no, it's just meat for everybody, and then the others who are like, no, it's just fruits or just vegetables for everybody, and then others who are like, no, you got to go keto and like whatever.
Right.
Anybody who holds an extreme position, it seems to me you're going to get some quackery out of that. So ultimately, people, I think, fall prey to the, the, the very simple kind of um, very known, regular scientific, professional opinions. Obviously, it seems to me like a balanced diet is not going to kill anybody at the very least.
No,
It's your best bet. It's what most, I think, species on the planet, you know, do. At least they have to get the nutrients that they can where they can get them, and they evolve to, be able to just survive off of a certain amount or of a different kind of diets over time, whatever. But the point is, you can't really lose horribly if you have a balanced diet. Now, if it doesn't work for you, if there's certain foods, there's allergic reactions, there's whatever, yes, then it becomes a bit of more of a debate, and you have to do your research and all this kind of stuff. But I think that's where people fall prey, is that they think, oh, wait, maybe I am eating something that's not good for me, and I don't know it, and blah blah blah. And I think, don't fall prey to that bullshit. Unless you truly, like Oliver here, has some real dietary problems for his entire life. This is something he needs to do research in, and he has, and all this kind of stuff. But and I'm talking like you're not there, I don't know why, but I'm just sort of talking to other people, because I don't like telling you what you already know about yourself. So I just don't want people to fall prey to that. To be like, oh yeah, I haven't noticed anything bad, but I definitely don't want to do something bad for my body and for my kids, and I want to propagate a good idea for promoting a healthier society. Whatever it is, if you want a virtue signal, even do it at your own fucking risk, and don't promote things that you don't know.
I agree. I fully agree with that.
And remember that you don't have to know certain things. If you're doing fine, why change anything?
Yeah.
Unless you're just interested,
I know I was blubbering a bit, because it's unfortunately a really complicated topic, and I'm very passionate about it, and it was a very general question, so I just dove in.
Well, yeah, I just want
about, but
if over the course of the other examples we're going to use, I just want you to point out what the problems when it comes to truth, when people think about these things, right?
Well, it goes deep, because, and I know I keep saying that.
Well, okay, so here's one that I know for a fact that you know about when it comes to health and just research in general, not just for health, but for science and for what's factually true about the world that we live in. And it's that correlation doesn't imply causation, or is it the other way around? Causation doesn't imply correlation. Yeah, so this one, ever since you told me about it a couple months, more than that now, but a little while ago, I realized, wow, this is a gorgeous gem for my sort of truth toolkit. And I feel like I have a responsibility now to make sure that I'm rooting out this idea of correlating with causation. So can you explain what that means to people who might not know what that means?
There's a great example that I think this is how I introduced it to you too. I love. I heard it once. It's not my example, but if there's a fire, a building fire going on, and there are firemen there, did the firemen cause the fire?
Okay, wait. Can you repeat that? I actually zoned out.
Yeah, no worries. And I think it's good to repeat these things. Okay, you see a fire on the corner of your street, the building is burning down, and the firemen arrive. Or they've been there already. Do you assume, because the firemen are there, and the firemen, you don't usually see firemen around, right? So you're seeing two weird things at once. You're seeing firemen and a fire. Are you going to assume that the firemen caused the fire because they're there?
Yeah, no. Well, I mean, because of the nature of what a fireman does, I'm going to assume he's there to put out the fire.
Exactly. So you're more informed in this case.
Yeah, I just think it's not the most sophisticated example, but
no, but it's very simple. I'm showing how ridiculous it is.
It would be ridiculous to say, oh yeah, the fireman, caused the fire. He's the one who made the fire.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that.
You can't correlate something just because he's a fireman doesn't mean he would make the fire. Yeah. Okay, I like that. But to put things in more practical terms, I think anxiety is a great one. This where this correlation causation problem that you've informed me of has helped me in my own life, and it's that when it comes to panic attacks and anxiety and all the symptoms that can come along with it, like right now in the last couple of weeks has been fatigue for me and all these other things. And I know that it's maybe the parting is like, okay, what's causing my anxiety right now? And whatever it is that I'm getting like symptoms, I think that they're correlated to, very real world physical, ailments. Because I said, okay, well, I partied a little bit, I drank some alcohol, and then I realized, and I got really tired. It drained my energy, which is fine, but it didn't make my body weak. It's not like my body is somehow destroyed in some manner, or that I have some disease that's keeping me from having energy. It's purely the anxiety from the alcohol, right? That the alcohol depleted and fucked around with my brain chemistry again, so that it's causing me all these kind of physical symptoms. These physical symptoms, they don't correlate with my body. They correlate with my mind. Because I've gone on runs and then I felt great after. You know what I mean? And
Well,
it's like
that has to do with your body. I would say that it's
it
very, very.
does, but what I mean is it's not correlated with physical ailments of my body. It's not like I have a broken toe and the cellular sort of state of my body or whatever is in an exhaustion mode. No, it's the anxiety, it's the brain chemistry. So yes, it's part of my body, but in a sense is that you can't correlate my symptoms with all these other diseases that I think I might have. When I get anxiety and I get all these symptoms, like, oh, maybe I have heart problems. Oh, I think I have asthma. I get asthma is the one that I always think that I have. Oh yeah, I must have asthma because I can't fucking breathe. And it's like, no, the breathing is, the tight chest that you get when you have anxiety issues. That's what's causing you to think that you can't breathe or that you have asthma, right? But the causation of my asthma symptoms isn't because of asthma. It's not because of my lungs. It's because of my anxiety. So there's a different cause there that correlates
And then you
with
have to
my
ask
symptoms.
yourself what's causing the anxiety. And
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly. So ultimately,
you have to
um,
get the order right.
yeah. So
Sometimes that's not easy.
I need to do that as much, and I try as hard as possible to continue with this sort of correlation doesn't imply causation rule. So I apply it to my own life so that I can get through this very real problem of anxiety that I get sometimes, right?
Mm.
So that was a great one for the Truth Toolkit.
Mm.
Absolutely.
Right.
Um,
And you've seen benefits from taking magnesium, right?
yes, I have. Absolutely. The,
Yeah.
within 2 weeks, if you take it regularly, within 2 weeks, it starts already. You just,
I wouldn't say it would get rid of anxiety, but it can
well, it
help.
depends for what reason. So here's another correlation thing that I figured out. I realized that a lot of my anxiety did come from the fact that I was depleted in magnesium because I had abused alcohol for too long, and that was the causation of my anxiety, a major cause of my anxiety. The 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 whole causation that I used to think, which was, oh, there's bad things going on in my life. I'm depressed. I have money problems. Whatever. All these deep things that I'm getting into. I thought those were the causes of my anxiety. But ever since taking magnesium and being a little bit more physically active, it's just disappeared. I go weeks, sometimes months without any anxiety whatsoever. But of course, again, I'm in Germany, and so I went a little bit off the rails, drank a lot of beer in Bavaria. So I kind of put myself back down into this
I
dip.
know.
But
It blows my mind how many people I've talked to who deal with mental health issues.
mhm,
I tell them, well, I ask them a bit about their lifestyle, and then I make a few suggestions that usually have nothing to do with, say, their relationship or their existential dread
yeah.
or anything like that. And usually it's something like fucking get to bed before 10 o'clock and turn off the screen before 8. And
Yeah.
when they finally do it, they're like, holy fuck,
Yeah. And that's
how have I not been living this way?
I
It's
gotta tell you,
insane.
that's another part of the emotional problem. So when you tell me things like, "Well, James, how much bread are you eating?" and it pisses me off because one,
Yeah,
I
I
don't want
know.
to
I
stop
know it
eating
pisses
bread.
you.
I'm a French guy, and two, I don't want it to be that easy. Like when you're stuck to your problems, you almost want them there so you can bitch about them. You know what I mean? You're making problems that don't exist because it feels somehow easier to get
They
through
are
your
still
day.
problems. They are
They
still
are,
problems,
they
but
are,
we tend
but
to make molehills into mountains.
but these problems, they're usually not the cause of physical ailments.
Yeah.
I can't say that just
Or
because
physical
I'm
stress. The actual
physical
sense
stress.
of stress.
Yeah. So like first off, you can handle a lot more stress. Like say, oh, I'm
Yeah.
arguing with my mother. It's causing me a lot of stress. And if you tell me, well, James, are you eating healthy? Are you sleeping properly? Are you doing this and that? I want to say fuck off because, one, the stress source is my mother because that's you're in an emotional state. So you're like, no, I want that to be the source of stress. And you come up with the logical conclusion that first off, these kinds of stresses are normal. You're supposed to be able to handle them. The reason why you can't is because you're not healthy. So get healthy. You'll be able to handle your fucking mother, right? I'm just using that as an example, Mama. Don't worry, I'm not actually stressed out by you. I love you. Um, but
Love you
yeah, she'll find that sweet. So this is why I'm starting to pay a lot more attention. Always last minute. Oh, Oliver, shit, I'm fucked again. Help me, help me. What do I need to do? Always after the fact. Never, you know.
and we forget it so easily. I
Yeah.
still do. I've been doing this
So
for years.
the emotional and mental state of and desire that you have for your problems is another issue that gets in the way of seeking truth and how it can impact your life in great, great ways. Um, like this whole anxiety trip is fucking with me because I'm in a country that's new. I'm trying to settle. I have a job starting in a couple of weeks. I hope I don't have to deal with this sort of anxiety. Will I be able to do it properly? Blah blah blah. So it has some very real world impacts. The truth matters. It really matters.
Yes,
So
absolutely. And unfortunately, I also want to bring in the simple fact that there's a lot of people who have motivation and incentive reasons to blot out truth. In many cases, it's a very very real thing. As soon as you can make yourself the one who dishes out the truth, the one who can control what truth whoever it is knows, is aware of, then you control them.
mm-hmm.
So that's why constantly seeking truth as an individual, not by listening to an authority. And I understand the importance of authority. It is absolutely necessary, but we need to constantly be checking authority. We have to always be double checking them. It has to be a somewhat even playing field. And all I'm saying is personal responsibility is the only way out to a
Yeah,
better life.
taking responsibility for yourself, but also you're taking responsibility for what you're putting out there. I think, people, for example, who are propagating this anti-vaccine thing, this to me, they haven't done enough research, and definitely not enough research in the opposing side. Um, and
I
and
would,
this
in my
this
personal opinion, I say both sides are a little bit extreme right now. The way it's going right now, I think
well,
that they're both extreme.
yeah, I
I'm not
mean,
pro or anti-vaccine. I think there are issues with vaccination, but we shouldn't be throwing it out with the bathwater. It's
no, I mean, yeah, for sure. I think, but whatever issues they are, they're definitely not issues that we should have on the um, conversation stage that implies that we shouldn't use vaccinations. I think that's completely
yeah.
it's a zero-sum game, and vaccinations win. They overwhelmingly win. That they do not cause nearly enough damage to outweigh the damage that it protects society from. It just doesn't. I mean, because people aren't vaccinating their children, now we're starting to see the rise in fucking like 17th century goddamn plagues. We're talking about measles and pox coming back, and like tuberculosis. I don't know, but the point is, it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous, and it's all for this ideology or this idea that you need to identify with this culture. Ooh, Jim Carrey is, he must know. It's like, what are you doing? Fuck anybody. It's not about other people. It's about you. What are you going to do for your child? Do you care about your child, or do you care about supporting what's hip, what's in, and what you think is better? Why don't you listen to the doctors and those who are actually on the front lines?
Okay,
Rogan had this guy who's
you can't say
literally
that.
on the front lines of this whole, he's the one who develops these goddamn vaccines and administers them. And his child is autistic, and he does research in autism as well. And it's clear now that autism is actually something that develops within it's prenatal, apparently.
Well,
So
again, I'm going to say people do your own research.
yes,
And
do your own
please do your
research.
own research.
But the point is that from my opinion now, the research that I've done is enough for me to say, okay, it's cool. Vaccinations are totally even though they might have some problems in this and that, they're a lot better than not vaccinating. So, I'm just trying to highlight here what happens when you don't take responsibility for the truth that you think you're supporting. It's not only impacting your life. We just got done talking about what it can do to your own life, but what it can do to your children's lives and to future generations' lives and to your own community. It's absolutely retarded. Now, if you were to take those same people, but you were to make it cool somehow that, we should just infect children on purpose, like they used to do in the 90s, I think, no, I don't think my mom did it, but, it was very common to like, Charlene's daughter just got the chicken pox. I'm going to have little Bobby go ahead and have a play date with them so that he can get it now before he, becomes too old and doesn't deal with the pox as easily. So it's like, people always go towards far extremes, and it's like, just vaccinate your kids, do what you got to do, and that's it. That was a bit of a rant, but
I really didn't want to get into that topic because it is, I hate to say it, way more complicated than that.
of course,
Yeah.
Look, everything can get incredibly complicated, but at the end of the day, there are certain truths that, like I said, you have to abide by if you want any kind of utility. And it's overwhelming that, in the utilitarian sense of truth, it's overwhelming that vaccinations are a lot more effective than not vaccinating. So to me, that it's just nuts that you're even if you can get mercury poisoning, let's say 1 in 100,000, right? Which I think the ratio of something like 1 in a million can get any kind of adverse effects from vaccinations, or even more than that.
I just want to tell you right now.
But even if it was 1 in 100,000,
there have been no tests done about that kind of statistics. There are literally no tests about that. I just want to say that.
Not the ones that I've looked into. I'll
find it.
But the ones that I've seen, yes. But the point is, even through logic, this is a truth that you can take it to the bank. Just logically speaking, is it better for you to do something about about the possible spread of an infectious disease, or nothing at all? What are you going to do if not vaccinate? What else? What else is there? Because nobody ever fucking talks about that. They don't say, oh yeah, I'm not vaccinating my kid. And if they do, it's usually some cockamamie idea like crystal therapy. Oh, I'm going to take this crystal that I bought for, $500 from some quack, and I'm going to do some shamanic kind of ritual around my kid, and all of a sudden germ theory and virus type statistics go out the window and you can just heal your child? No. Come and tell me, that you have at least some kind of logical and potent alternative, not like a crystal, but you don't.
Anyway. Just tell me that you've been doing research and that you're continuing to do research.
Well,
that's all I want to know from someone.
Yes, but to me, I just want someone to at least acknowledge logic when it comes to truth. So I guess now we're getting off the rails a little bit. But the main thing I was trying to say is that you're doing a disservice to a whole lot of other people in support of what you feel can help bolster your identity, and that's so ethically wrong to me. I mean, it's not only just shirking off your responsibility that you have to your community, which you pretend to feel for, but you're literally doing evil. You are being evil. Shirking responsibility is one thing, but when you don't do research and then you literally just choose some cockamamie alternative that has no research or statistics behind it either, that's valid anyway, it's evil at that point. It's not just shirking, it's evil. So anyway, I think we can move on from that because I mean it's clear. It's clear. Here's another one that's kind of health related. The Catholic Church, they have repeatedly told in the most like ravaged countries of Africa for AIDS, and my dad died of AIDS. You know this, but just for other people. So I have a very real experience of what HIV does. Okay, and the Catholic Church was telling these ravaged countries that are just dying in the millions out of this disease to not use condoms because they're going to go to hell. So like, and so what do you think happened? Of course, an even bigger outbreak of HIV. It's like,
Yeah.
What the fuck?
Yeah.
It's not. It's like, it's not like they were saying keep fucking each other without condoms, but they were saying that they were lying basically. They have no proof that if you use a condom you're going to go to hell. Nobody says that, not even by their own doctrines, not even by their own, you know what I mean? The only thing they might have is, don't waste the seed of the Lord or some bullshit like that. But nothing says, you're going to go to hell. And if it does, so fucking what? If you're going to have sex, if you're going to break that religious law of yours, well, do it while not risking other people's lives and your own. It just makes sense. If you're going to sin all the way. You know what I mean? It's like, why couldn't the Pope say that? He could still have said, you're going to hell if you use a condom, but at least you're not killing someone else in the process. So maybe your hell experience won't be as bad because, whatever it is, you could still have upheld it. He could have said, don't use condoms, they go to hell, but also don't fuck while you're not married and all this kind of stuff. But if you're going to fuck someone, then use a condom at least. It's like, it just doesn't make sense to me. It's evil.
You could have added 2 sentences of nuance to that and saved
millions, maybe. Who knows? Who knows if that's going to cause millions of lives? Who knows? But definitely in the thousands. So, there you go. That, I think my passionate rant might have hammered it home there. That it's not just your responsibility towards truth in terms of doing your research, but it's in terms of using nuance and using your logic, because it can get very illogical very quickly and unnecessary. Like I said, the guy could have easily said, yeah, you're going to go to hell if you use a condom, but use it if you're going to fuck anyway. So anyway, moving forward, I want to get more into a little bit of the global warming thing, because I think we're almost through with all of the social justice kind of virtue signaling. Green.
I would say that there's a lot of stuff that we haven't covered.
No, there's a lot, but I want to get into other things too. Like I don't just want to talk about today's issues when it comes to health, environment, climate, and all this stuff. But I'm just saying, might as well cap it off with the climate.
Sure.
So when it comes to global warming, what other truths can we point out that people are susceptible of failing when it comes to responsibilities? One of them, like I said earlier, has to be the
nuclear.
Nuclear, yeah. But do you have any others before we get into that?
Well, I'll just say that, like, as much as I'm for green technologies, we have to realize that the ones that we have available now do bring up serious issues that are not being addressed, and we don't have the infrastructure in place yet to set them up anyways. So to protest a pipeline or a nuclear reactor right now, well, if you shut it down, you don't have heating. You don't have you're basically screwed for the next 5 to 10 years. And if we can even set up an infrastructure without that nuclear and without that pipeline in the meantime. And I understand we want to do better for the environment, but we have to think about, well, if you try to get rid of one system, what are you going to replace it with? Because if you just don't replace it with anything, then you're just cutting the legs out from society, very simply. And like, for example, Tesla cars, Elon Musk. Everyone loves Elon Musk. But I just got to say, his cars take very large lithium batteries, which have to be mined out with machines that use coal and taken from the earth. And lithium is not a sustainable resource in the least. It is very, very, very damaging to the environment in many ways.
Doesn't it outweigh using gas-powered vehicles, though?
Long term. But we still have to think about the issues of lithium, because that is a form of waste in itself that has repercussions. And it's not to say that, like, very simply, right now, we cannot know if it outweighs it or not. But we have to address these issues. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I don't know. I still think, I mean, it doesn't take, like, let's say, if we go the logical route as much as we can. I mean, there's probably things that I'm not aware of, but, how much lithium can you pull out of the ground, in one day? It's got to be enough, even if it was enough for just one car battery, right? Mm-hmm. The amount of carbon you put into the atmosphere to mine it, it can't trump the lifespan of that battery. I mean, that battery will go for at least 10 years. So you talk about 10 years of a car using electricity rather than one day's worth of carbon in the air. I mean, that just seems to be logical.
I mean, absolutely, I agree with you there. But again, we don't have numbers on that.
Yeah, but at least I do appreciate that. Even I think what you're pointing out is contrary to populism. It's just popular because he's cool and all this thing.
Yes.
Let's look into where there is damage, because there's always damage somewhere. So I appreciate that. I actually hadn't thought about
it might fix one issue but bring up another.
Exactly. So right. We have to be careful. There is no, even though we would like to say, oh, okay, we can pin it on him, he did everything perfectly. It's like, well, let's see where he went wrong so that maybe it doesn't lead us into a whole other world of shit. So I appreciate that. Even though we don't have good data on it yet, it's a good thing to keep an eye on it. But what I have to say about the nuclear power thing, so I think this is the main issue today. Most people are saying, okay, we have to go to solar and wind. And it's like, yes, there's no issue there. We need to do it. I think Denmark was the first country to go completely off of carbon type fuels. Anyway, it's being done in several countries, like in Scandinavia and all this kind of stuff, in record numbers. I mean, they're going at 30, 40%. I think there was one as high as 70. They're just, very, very efficient. They can get off of these, carbon fuels. But you can't do that with a country of like China, when you're talking about, almost 1 billion people, or 300 million people,
And you can't do it 100% in most places.
No, exactly. I mean, you get a transition. Yeah. You can't do it overnight. So what do you do in the meantime with that transition? So again, here's another responsibility that you got to take. Don't take someone else's proof. Like, oh, look, here's the data, or here's the news even that I got. And it's like, oh, really? That was in the news? Okay, well, it's good. No, go and do your research for yourself. So here's one that I'm going to point out. I heard recently that here in Germany, they shut down nuclear power plants because they're trying to move towards solar and wind. But in the interim, they're going back to coal, right? They're trying to shut down nuclear so that they can experience a greater push for solar and wind. But in the meantime, they're actually doing worse for the environment because they're going back to coal. Now, it seems to me logical that you need to push for nuclear. Nuclear power is the way to go in the meantime between solar and wind. And then, of course,
specific situation.
Exactly, because think about it this way. The waste products of nuclear power are not, they don't filter out into the air. They don't go out into the air at all. They're not airborne. They don't cause carbon problems, footprint, okay? They do, however, contaminate earth, the soil, right, where we bury it deep and shit, and it is bad. It's like you're not going to get rid of this stuff. It decays over, I think it's like even thousands of years. I'm not sure. So whether Germany is doing this or not, I don't know. I have to go look into it. But it's clear that we want to continue with nuclear power, and we can do it more cheaply and more securely. And especially after Fukushima, we really pushed. We say, oh shit, we're still using like reactors from the 70s. Like, come on, let's get our shit together. Right? We can do better with our technology here. One of the research that I did was thermite. There's still a big community out there that believes, hey, we can use thermite instead of plutonium, and it's much safer. It doesn't, it's better for on all fronts here. People can't use it for the waste product for nuclear weapons. It's cleaner, blah blah blah. So why isn't there more research into that right now? Because transitioning an infrastructure that already exists takes longer, and this is Jeremy Rifkin's work. Thank you very much. He talks about it in the Third Industrial Revolution. If anybody wants to YouTube that, it's great. He explains how, and it's just logical that if you're going to take an infrastructure that's already set up, it takes longer for you to transition that infrastructure into a new one than it does to just create a new infrastructure out of nowhere. So this is why Africa is going to do a lot better and I think is already starting to do a lot better for when it comes to carbon footprint, because they've virtually had no infrastructure in a lot of these places. So they just come in, they start installing solar panels, boom, 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 it's all good to go, and they're green. Whereas in the States, you got to have the battery technology had to be developed. There's where Elon Musk did a great service, right? You need to have technicians that are trained for solar panels, and you got to manufacture these solar panels, and you got to go and install them on virtually every single fucking unit of housing and buildings in the entire country. That's going to take 10 to 15 years, whether you like it or not. It's got to take at least 10 to 15 years. So in that time, what are you going to do? Go back to coal? Go back to oil? No, you're going to have to use nuclear power. So we need to generate more nuclear power right now. It's still not the best option. But it's the lesser of two evils. So here's where people are again doing a disservice to the very values that they're trying to uphold. We want to save the planet. We want to keep global warming at bay. We don't want this. So how do we get there? Nuclear power. What? No, of course not. That's bad. Nuclear power. What are you talking about? Radioactive waste. Yes, but do your fucking research, right?
Yeah, it's context.
It's context. Exactly. Context is absolutely important. It's not just what's good and what's bad. When you do your research, if you want to take responsibility for the truth you're going to support, you need to look at things in context. You can't just look at all the research on both sides and then say, oh yeah, well this is good for that reason and that's good for that reason, or this is bad on both sides. Oh, okay, this one outweighs this one, so I got to go with this one. No, you need to see in context.
It's good to do that, but then you also have to inform yourself about the here and now.
Exactly. The here and now, the future for yourself. Try to figure out for yourself, and also listen to other people who can look at both sides' data, right? And say, look, I'm just looking to try to save the environment here genuinely. And I've looked at both sides. And you get these guys. Look at Joe Rogan's podcast, man. I mean, people do talk, and they're experts in some way. You know what I mean? And they'll look at, like, Tim Pool is a great one. I think he does. He's a journalist. I think he does lean a little bit too far in one way. He's a little bit rigid sometimes, but generally, I think he's genuine in looking at two sides of an argument and to really try to like find out what the context is, not just what the data is. Hell, I mean, even Rogan does that a lot. I mean, he's definitely a role model in that sense. But we've kind of talked about all this stuff with current issues and what we're talking about. But when it comes to truth, in other manners, what can you think of? Like morality, maybe we should talk about the more philosophical aspects, right?
Responsibility, truth. Yeah. Well, with morality, that's something that we touched on briefly in another episode, but what we've concluded is that there is a constant responsibility to refining your concept of morality, constantly trying to figure out what is good, what good means to a better degree, to a more, to a higher degree, even within context, because it changes to a certain degree from moment to moment, depending on the situation. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. Not at all. It means that you're on a surfboard on a wave. The ground is moving, but you got to move with it. Otherwise, you fall. It's as simple as that, really.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So let me throw you a bit of a curveball on that one. What do you think of the transgender movement right now when it comes to child transitioning, hormone treatment?
Child transitioning, right. Well, children, I like to say, well, I don't like to say it, but it's one of my opinions that children are the most oppressed group there is. One of the most, at least, because ultimately they're helpless. And with the transgender movement, it gets nasty nowadays. You posted an article recently, right? Was it today? Was it earlier today?
I've posted several articles in the last few months, but yes, today was the last time I posted one.
Right. And there's a case, the one that I'm thinking of specifically, where both parents had different opinions as to whether the child should transition or not.
That's the one I posted today. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So the father disagreed that the child should transition, and the mother thought it was.
Yes, but both were in support. Actually,
both were in support. Okay.
I mean, he actually, the father wanted to get the process started, and they did. He supported his daughter going to therapy for this, to assess whether, and then when they said, okay, yeah, it's good to go, you're cleared, you should probably start, hormone treatment. He said no. He reversed his support, and he said, well, wait a second, this is a bit soon. I mean, she's only 14. Excuse me.
Yeah, no worries.
So, what do you have to say about that? Yeah.
Well, I'll simply bring up, I'm not really sure where you're leading this in terms of responsibility to truth, but I'll simply say that from what I've heard, I personally am in support of transgenders, but there is a seeming willful ignorance to the fact that there are many transgenders who've come out saying that they've regretted the process. Mm-hmm. And it's not to say all of them. I do believe that it is something that seems to help some people, but giving a child the choice, a child can they make that decision really? And if we look back at the track record, something like, I think I might be getting this mixed up with another number, so I'm sorry to anyone if I got that right. I got that wrong, but 40% of a certain population question regretted the process done. Mm-hmm. So it's all to say, we have to take this into account. Can children make decisions like that for themselves that will affect them for the rest of their lives?
Mm-hmm. So I think what I'm trying to point out is that there's a responsibility that you have when you encounter something like a logical wall and an emotional need to be supportive. I mean, people are stuck between the two, and almost every time they'll ignore the logical wall and just try to support this emotional kind of standpoint where it's like, well, we need to do exactly. So here's what I mean by the biological wall. It's you can't definitively say that it's going to be a good or a bad thing for a child to transition. Now, the logical wall seems to be this. If you don't transition the child before they go through puberty, if they are truly experiencing dysphoria and they want to deal with that dysphoria by transitioning, when they're adults, well, they can no longer do that to the fullest extent that they would like because they've already gone through the process of their hormonal development. So this makes logical sense. So it makes sense whereas people would like to think, therefore, you have to allow children to transition before their hormonal period. But if you think about what happens during your hormonal development, these are the very things that get rectified or get, in fact, maybe even change things up. It's kind of like if you feel that you're a boy or a girl before your hormonal development, there's no way for you to know if that's the truth until you've actually gone through the hormonal development, maybe. We don't have enough data, I think, to suggest that there's something intrinsic about the brain's chemistry that makes you one gender or another, or it gives you some kind of dysphoria right from the get-go. We don't know this very well yet. And even if we did, right, who's to say that the most extreme form of solution is the one we should go for? Is there not any other way? Like, is there a chemical reversal of that dysphoria that we can deal with? Because it seems to me very extreme to just say, yeah, let's do this, all the way and do like, breast implants or genital mutilation or whatever it is. Shouldn't have used mutilation, but castration. So there's a logical wall there.
There's in the past, there has been, well, actually now there is a push against the past way of doing things, which would be the opposite, the more practical sense, the opposite of supportive. So someone starts saying, I am a woman, and they're a man.
Yeah.
At that moment, I don't know. Anyways. And then people would have said, well, you're crazy, shock therapy or medication. Or
exactly.
Like that, right?
Exactly. We
now
don't
we're going the opposite direction, saying,
you're
no,
not
let's
crazy. Yeah, but it's the opposite. And it's like Ben Shapiro pointed this out pretty well. But if you say you're not crazy, it's just a social construct, then you're also doing that person a disservice. So here's the thing. By the same token that they believe, these people are usually the ones who believe it's all a social construct, right?
Right.
Well, if it's a social construct, then by that same token, it shouldn't matter whether the person transitions or not. It's all a social construct anyway. So it's a logical fallacy to buy into this idea that we should just transition children right away, because to me, it's kind of like child abuse. It could very well be child abuse. And by the same token, they could say the same thing about me. No, if you're keeping them from transitioning, you're abusing them. So it's just very extreme. There's a logical wall, and there's this thing of support. But it seems to me like the person who stays in the middle, who says, look, I understand there's a logical wall here, and I understand that, we want to be emotionally supportive. How can I better represent balance between the two? Well, I'm trying to be emotionally supportive to the point where I'm willing to go counter culture, counter populism, at the risk of being seen as some kind of bigot. I don't care. The people who I know in my life and the people who I don't know.
Because you care.
Yes, I don't know because I care truly. I would rather someone call me a bigot, but I'm pushing for a more secure, safer approach at trying to figure out these problems. Because until we get past that logical wall, there's no way I'm going to go and appeal to my emotional self and forget my rationality and say, yeah, go ahead, let's just castrate and hormone inject and all this kind of stuff to kids that are 5 fucking years old. It's just insane to me. I mean, we did it with women with hysteria all the way up until I think it was in the 1800s. We did it with schizophrenics, with people who have epilepsy. We did it with so many, like autistics, so many groups where we would say, oh yeah, shock therapy, inject them filled with fucking drugs like lithium and God knows what else, lobotomy, and like ice baths and some real weird fucked up shit. Just go to the extreme instead of, maybe doing more research and trying to find out what these things really are. People just want a solution very quickly, right away, and they think that, and they're doing it in the sort of image of virtue. And it's like, you're not virtuous if you're jumping to these conclusions. It's just, look, transgenderism didn't just pop up overnight. It's not like in the last 5, 10 years since we've been talking about this stuff, all of a sudden we realize, oh, there's transgenders in the world. No, we didn't talk about it very much because they are a very small minority. But gender dysphoria has been around, probably for a lot longer than we know. So why is it?
Well, there are cases of it in ancient empires in the world.
Exactly. So to me, it seems like, if we want to give people the opportunity or the right to deal with their ailments, whether you want to call it an ailment or not, in their own way, I'm totally for it as an adult. But when you're starting to talk about children and you're talking about logical walls, I think you're not taking responsibility, not just for truth, but then for values and for other. Again, it always goes back down to what you're doing to other people when you're not, when you're shirking off your responsibilities. It becomes an evil practice. You're doing evil in the world. Again, I also support. I'm a liberal, right? Like, if you're an adult and you understand the ramifications, you go right ahead. You do what you want. But I also believe in the rights of other people. So it's a hard one, right? Like, if I was the owner of a hotel and I felt like you weren't passable enough or something like that, I might not want you to work for me. I don't think I personally would care, really. But it's kind of hard to tell people who own places and stuff like that to say, yeah, okay. You can't, you're going to lose your business, or you're going to be charged with discrimination if you don't hire these people. All these things are very tough, but ultimately I care about freedom and enough to support everybody's freedoms to the degree that we should have them, right? It's all about using logic to the furthest extent possible, and then after that, having a discussion and trying to balance things out and see nuance, and doing what we can case by case, because we can't do much else.
I'll just say, I mean, it's very simple. Let's stop assuming that we have figured it all out.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know if society's ever going to stop being a work in progress. So fucking stop with the fucking arrogance. Stop shunning the other side, and just sit back and keep learning. That's all you can do.
Yeah, I think it's a good way to recap that too. I think it's another responsibility you have towards truth is to understand that it's an ongoing process. Is to not be arrogant and to move forward with a very present awareness that you never actually know the truth in its entirety, and that it's subject to change, and it's subject to, because like 5 years from now, even maybe 6 months from now, if we find out that there's a way to tell whether someone's going to experience dysphoria, you can do something, like, it's absolute. Yep. The results are in. At 7 years old, we know that there's a certain chemistry in the brain that cannot be reversed. They really do need to transition as much as possible. Whatever, I would be all for it. But as we stand right now,
I don't know, man. Even then, I would say, cool, good. Maybe we're a step closer, but I can't be sure yet.
Yeah, you can't be sure, of course, and you'll never be sure until we've actually, maybe we'll never be sure in our lifetimes, because you need to see what happens when they grow up and all this kind of stuff, right? But the point is, I'm willing to, in light of evidence, support things. But the reason why I'm more skeptical and I'm careful is not because I'm some kind of asshole, bigot, racist, whatever you want to call me. It's because I genuinely care, and I don't want the adverse effects of not caring, which would be, in this case, letting society propagate an idea that's bad, a truth that isn't factual, and then we get an even worse situation. So yes, like, thousands of people who commit suicide or who are going through identity crises and whatever, and it just blows up in your face, and it's like, oof, not good either. So it's a contextual kind of issue. So lots of responsibility there, lots of it. We're talking about children in this case, right? So, fuck. The picture that I'm starting to get after this conversation is that the responsibility we all have towards truth is incredibly important. I mean,
Well, it's
it's
life.
it's the ultimate importance. You know, if you think about it. Uh, I mean, I guess, duh. Welcome to the party. Yeah, that's why we have science. That's why we talk about stuff. That's why people are so political. And
That's why that's how I've seen it for a long time. Life wants you to get involved. It's giving you life so that you can get interested.
yeah, yeah,
So you can
exactly.
fucking dig your nails into it and keep experiencing things.
Yeah,
That's it.
yeah. I like that. I like that. That's an
Right.
interesting way to put it. Oh, do you have any closing statements?
Um, yeah, here's one. When people say that science says this or that, I understand the importance of that, but I simply want to say that if that's how you think science works, then you do not know how science works. Once again, science is exactly what we were just talking about. It's a process towards truth.
Hmm.
Correlation does not imply causation, does not mean causation. It's as simple as that. We're all still trying to figure shit out. Yes, we do have indicators and patterns that point towards certain conclusions, but they're, once again, not conclusive. They're pointing towards conclusions. We're so far away from really knowing the truth about most things. If people really understood how studies work, scientific studies work, and how much there is out there, and the bureaucracy and the academics behind it, they would realize that we are decades away from really knowing fuck all. If even there, that's it. That's what I say. So drop the arrogance, keep learning as much as you can. We're all still trying to figure this shit out together.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing to point out real quick. Is that I think we ultimately all have to rely on science to su- use facts to support our truths, and so you need a healthy skepticism towards science, even science,
Even
because
with science, when people say that everyone
yeah,
agrees with something, sometimes that's true, absolutely.
yeah,
But most of the time, people don't realize how many groups are fighting about nuances within those
yeah.
groups.
Before Carl Jung came along, Sigmund Freud was developing, psychoanalysis, and everybody agreed it was scientific proof and facts. But Karl Popper came along and proved that actually most of Sigmund Freud's conclusions were pseudoscience. And Carl Jung, fortunately, kind of steered us in the right direction, and that's why,
At
modern
least
psychology goes off of his model and not Freud's, thankfully. Um, so even science could definitely get things wrong in a big way. So that is a great way to remind yourself to be fucking humble, because even the people who study this shit, the people who are supposed to be the most unbiased, can get things absolutely wrong and be biased and have all these problems, and then propagate very bad ideas. Um,
not to
yeah,
say don't listen to them.
yeah.
Definitely listen to
I
them,
mean,
but
in the Middle
be careful.
Ages, in the Dark Ages, bloodletting was considered a way of a way of curing people.
Well,
It's like,
we used to think the world was flat. We used to think that the atom was a ball
yeah,
that couldn't be split. I could go on. There's so many fucking examples.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Um, so be skeptical to some degree if you have to make a decision.
The balance. Be skeptical. Be open. Be skeptical.
Yeah,
Be open.
but if you have to make a decision, though, I think that would be a great way to try to close this conversation.
Right. That's
How would you go about that? You got to make one anyway. So what are you going to do in that case?
well. First of all, I'd say figure out how much time you have or you think you have to make a decision, and do all the best work you can within that, and then make a decision based off of what you feel, based off of what you learned is best. And if it was a mistake, learn from it. That's it.
Hmm. I like that. Yeah. So you feel based off of what you feel was best after your research, not based on what you feel right away is best out of any other, so I'm sure a lot of people feel great about their kids and they love their kids, but they also feel like vaccinations are a bad thing because they've been told that by their friends and peers and whatever. So then they go and do the bad thing. But no, go do your research, and then if you truly love your kid, if you truly, other people are gonna be like, oh, you're saying that they don't love their kids. I did the research, but I preferred the facts that were alternative. It's like, look, some things are overwhelming, and if the community is overwhelmingly telling you something, that's where I think the opposite side of science is telling you something. So, if the consensus is strong enough, don't just go off of some alternative fact. You're like, oh, well, this alternative fact suits my
You can research it, but
predilections.
be careful.
Yeah, research, but if there's certain consensus, like we all know that gravity is real. We believe in gravity. It's a wide enough consensus for it to be something you can believe in. You don't have to be. So I'll give you a small example real quick. I was working with this guy, and it was hilarious because he homeschools his kids, and I said, oh yeah, I love teaching kids and stuff like that. He's like, oh, I said maybe I could come and teach you a couple lessons about science and quantum physics and all this kind of stuff. And he's like, yeah. And then so I had mentioned something about science, and he said, no, that's not true. And it was this technicality that in that technicality he was right. And so the technicality was that the that the speed of light is the fastest thing in the universe. And then he's like, nope, that's not true, because he had learned this new fact that the universe was expanding, right, exponentially quickly. So to him, he's like, no, there is something faster than speed of light. The universe is expanding at immeasurable speeds, much faster than light moves. And it's like, god damn, dude, like he chose one alternative. It's not even an alternative fact. It's a fact that doesn't apply. It's mutually exclusive from the fact that there's nothing that goes faster than the speed of light. The construct of space-time
completely from left field sometimes.
Yeah, but it was just hilarious. I'm like, god damn, dude, you're going to teach your kids something that doesn't make sense because you're choosing some fact that and you're not, again, like we were talking about, you're not putting it in a larger context. You're just learning facts out of nowhere and then teaching your kids these facts, when at the end of the day you need to do the real research and understand the context. Yes, the universe expands at a much faster rate than the speed of light, but that's the construct of space-time that's expanding. It's not an element that travels through space-time. It's the space-time itself that you're talking about. So no, nothing goes faster than the speed of light. You know what I mean?
That's another thing. Stop saying things are this way or aren't. What we can easily say, it takes more words, but you can simply say, this is what we think.
This is what we think.
This seems to be.
Exactly. In these contexts.
Is what I read. This is what that person said. Blah, blah, blah.
Exactly. So here's where my position is, because such and such a reason. That allows a lot for more conversation and a lot easier of an emotional kind of playing ground, where the opposite person can say, well, here's what my position is based on these facts. Then you can both come together and maybe discover this kind of context. So if I had been the same kind of person he was, and say, yeah, the speed of light is the fastest thing in the universe, and he says, no, the expansion of the universe itself is faster than the speed of light, so that's technically could either of us jump outside of ourselves, of our positions, and say, oh, well, actually both are kind of true if you think about it. There's a technicality here at play. Probably not. But because fortunately I do contextualize, and I do go based off of positions that I can hold or not hold, then I was able to say, yes, no, you're right. I told them, I was like, you're right. Technically, the expansion of the universe goes faster than the speed of light, but that's not something that travels through space-time. When people say what's the fastest thing in the universe, they don't think of the universe itself. So obviously in that context, you're talking about what travels through space-time. So you can see the logical logical conclusion that you get when you contextualize. That's all I was trying to point out. So that's it's pretty good, man. Yeah, I hope this has helped a couple people at least. And we'll see you next time. Peace out. Nice. We should end it all the time with that, though.
Yeah, sure.